here's a story you might have missed. A Labour-run council has joined the Wokerati clubhouse after saying that they will check LGBTQ plus credentials of businesses before giving out contracts. There appears to be a growing trend of this kind of stuff infiltrating institutions, with the likes of former NatWest boss Dame Alison Rose trying to debank Nigel Farage, Aviva CEO Amanda Blanc vetting white men to improve diversity. So tonight, I am asking, would Labour turn Britain into a woke hellscape if they were in government? Let me know your thoughts. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com. Tweet me at GBNews. While you're there, go and vote in our poll. I'll bring you the results very shortly. But to debate this now, I am joined by LGBT rights campaigner Peter Tatchell and Tory MP Jonathan Gullis. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Jonathan, your thoughts on whether or not a Labour council should be checking a business's LGBTQ plus credentials before requiring their services?
No, what council should be doing is focusing on the quality of the product or service that a business provides and then making sure that it actually is value to the taxpayer that they're serving. And actually, what I'm most disgusted by is that whilst Camden Council is busy virtue signalling as typical Labour councils do, they actually in July this year were found by the regulator for social housing to have 9,000 social homes without fire alarms, 4,000 without carbon monoxide alarms fitted too. And that was because in March of this year, they had to plead guilty in Westminster Magistrates Court to the fact that they were and pay a £500,000 fine after the death of a resident back in November 2017 because of their inability to protect and have health and safety correctly in their social housing. So it's just more of the same rubbish, woke virtue signalling nonsense that everyone's bored of. And actually what we'd rather see is local businesses backed regardless of their views on things, because ultimately I don't want to know what a view of a business is. Individuals in their spare time, that's up to them, but not for businesses as a whole.
Peter, your views on this? Is this not just a way of putting the LGBTQ plus agenda on everybody? If your business doesn't overtly back this, then you essentially lose money.
What Camden Council is doing is enforcing the law. Under the Equality Act 2010, all local authorities are required to combat discrimination and ensure equal opportunities for everyone. That includes LGBT plus people, but also women, Black and Asian people, disabled people, elderly people. Everybody has to have an equal chance under that policy. Now, the issue is not that LGBT plus people are being singled out, because they're not. The story that's published in the Telegraph is quite misleading. It's a policy for everyone, and I don't think any of your listeners would want a council to do business with a enterprise that, for example, refused to hire black people. That would be totally wrong. And that's why the equality principle has to apply across the board to everyone.
But, Jonathan, I'll bring you in on this again now. Is there not essentially here the potential for this to be a slippery slope? We saw Alison Rose with NatWest looking to debank Nigel Farage for his views. We've seen the Aviva boss there having to check a white man's credentials. And now here we are with local council. I mean, is it any wonder that loads of them are going bust when they're wasting their time on this stuff?
Well, I think the concern here is that we're talking about values and who determines whose values are right or improper. You know, we don't understand what people's values are based on their upbringing, their faith, and many other reasons. And whilst Peter's absolutely correct that the Equality Act must be applied and that we would expect councils to have a proper procurement process in place, to have this progressive idea of positive discrimination simply doesn't work. In fact, all it does is highlight the division and divide in our society. It doesn't actually, therefore, bring people together. So again, what I'd rather see council officers using their time effectively doing is actually checking the procurement that the business in question can supply the goods or services, are going to be of the satisfactory quality, and will deliver value to the taxpayer of the Camden Council area, just as I would expect that in Stoke-on-Trent or in Staffordshire County Council as well, where I'm proud to serve. Peter, so this idea of this woke nonsense really needs to be driven out. I'm so bored of businesses trying to impose values that they think they have to sign up to in order to try and keep Stonewall and other radical groups happy, which is simply just outdated.
But, Peter, this is a bit like the woke mafia, isn't it? And this is why companies decide to overtly virtue signal with things like pride flags outside them, or whether it's to do with Black Lives Matter or whatever, is because someday a council might come knocking and say, can we have your services? And you have to prove somehow that you've been overtly non-anti-LGBT, you've been overtly non-racist, etc. It traps us all in this vortex of woke horror, doesn't it?
Well, this policy is not about positive discrimination. It's not about preferencing anybody or giving them advantages. It's just ensuring that everyone who works for a supplier to a local authority has equal opportunities, that they're not discriminated against by that provider.
That's the law.
So it's the law, and it's quite right. It protects everyone. It doesn't single out any particular group for special privileges. It protects everyone, and I think everybody who is bidding for a job wants to know that their employer does not discriminate.
But how do they have to prove that, Peter?
Well, they show, for example, they have inclusive policies, equal opportunity policies.
Right, there you go. So you have to prove, right, X amount of our staff are gay or X amount of our staff are black.
No, not X amount. It's just that they have a policy that they don't tolerate racism or discrimination against elderly people. I mean, I would find it shocking that a council did business with an enterprise that, for example, refused to hire older people. You know, some businesses have tried to have a policy of not hiring over 50s. That's discrimination against elderly people. And Camden's policy and the policy of other local authorities is designed to stop that, to ensure that people over 50 have an equal chance in the workplace.
Jonathan, do you want to just come back on all of this? I mean, I know a lot of people at the moment are seeing their council tax going through the roof, and then you see all of a sudden you've got a kind of gay pride pedestrian crossing in your neighbourhood, and the council's asking you to put things in 13 different bins and check whether or not you subscribe to an LGBTQ plus agenda.
Well, Peter talked about inclusive policies. Is inclusive policies having Labour MPs like Kate Osborne saying that she's going to block TERFs, TERFs being obviously a derogatory term to attack women who believe in women's rights and believe that a woman is a biological female? Do businesses have to therefore allow biological males into female toilets in order to tick a box so they can say that they're LGBTQIA+, I hope I've got all those correct, inclusive or not? This is the problem that we have in this day and age. It's just we're getting so caught up in nonsense like this, virtue signaling nonsense, that pleases no one but the student unions of many universities, rather than the folk that I serve in Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Talk, that simply want their council to collect their bins, fill the potholes, regenerate their high streets, have a good running bus service in their local area, and obviously bring and create more high-skilled, high-wage jobs locally. That's what they're interested in, not this nonsense, and Camden Council should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, can I just say that absolutely, of course, councils should seek value for money, the best possible deal for people who pay their council tax. But this is just an additional consideration. It doesn't mean that councils are going to make this the primary consideration. It's just one other consideration.
But and of course, it would be really interesting, though, Peter, wouldn't it? Just on that, it would be really fascinating to know whether or not this means that a council would ever do business with anyone remotely linked to the fundamentalist Islamic community, wouldn't it? Because what are the LGBT rights like there? What are the women's rights like there? But I bet that wouldn't get in the way of Camden Council doing business.
Oh, yes,
yes.
Like their policy explicitly prohibits any form of discrimination based on religion or belief. So it includes not only religious people, but atheists and non-believers. So that would be absolutely covered, and that would not be permitted. I just think this is it's a bit of a storm in a teacup. It's a bit of a culture war issue. Really, what Camden's doing is what dozens or hundreds of councils across the country have been doing for years without a fuss until this issue has been raised.
Yeah, but also people were being debanked for years without a fuss until Nigel Farage kicked off, and I think it is a massive.
That's another issue which I'm opposed to that. I thought what happened to Nigel was wrong, but this is a different issue. This is about employment practices.
Final word quickly, Jonathan, as to why
very quickly, Sally. We're seeing other councils. So if you look at Dumbartonshire Council, I think SNP controlled. They've removed books by Israeli authors from their public libraries. If you look at Lancaster, which has got a coalition of Lib Dems, Greens and Labour, they've asked for the pension fund to not go to any businesses inside the what they call the Israeli settlements in Palestine. I mean, this is just councils virtue signalling for no one's benefit, rather than focusing on delivering the services that are desperately needed to be delivered.
All right, look, both of you, thank you very much. Top stuff, that's LGBT rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, Tory MP Jonathan Gullis. Now, we reached out to Camden Council, and this is what they had to say. Camden Council, like all councils, has a long-standing expectation that all companies we work with will follow law under the Equality Act. We are proud of our work on equalities and inclusion. The change we have made is to make it clear to bidders that we can reduce reject them if there is evidence of discrimination against anyone with a protected characteristic in line with the Equality Act. Anyway, who do you agree with there? Will Labour turn Britain into a woke hellscape? Alan on Twitter says, amazingly, despite their best efforts, the Tories still aren't our worst option. Crazy times, he says. Sheila on Twitter says, yes, Labour will turn Britain into a woke hellscape, but they've only finishing the job the Tories started. Interesting, can't get around the idea that all of this started really on the Tories' watch, which is fair enough. Alan on Twitter says, absolutely, the next 5 years will be hell under Labour if they win. Well, your verdict is now in. Unsurprisingly, 90% of you agree that Labour will turn Britain into a woke hellscape. 10% of you say that they won't. But